Poveglia was built on an island between Venice and Lido, within the Venetian lagoon. In the year 421, it was a place for men, women, and children to take refuge from barbaric invasions on the mainland Italy. It was an incredibly hard island to invade, so the barbarians deemed it not worth the effort and focused their attacks on the mainland. People who remained in Poveglia didn't have the laws and taxes imposed on them by Italy. However, in the 14th century, the peaceful times would come to an end, and one of the worst human-caused atrocities would take place there. Hey everyone, as we're heading to Poveglia, I want to provide some context as to what's going on here. In 1348, the bubonic plague arrived in Venice, which resulted in the death of half the population. The plague would come in waves, and this would be considered the first one. The way it would spread would be through fleas and small animals by a plague bacterium, Yersinia pestis. After 1 to 7 days of exposure, you would develop symptoms including headaches, fever, vomiting, and swollen and painful lymph nodes appearing near the area the bacteria entered the skin. Without treatment, 30 to 90% of those infected by it died. It's not hard to imagine how the bubonic plague would end up killing millions of people. After the first wave, the residents of Poveglia were forced to move to another island in the Venetian lagoon, so Poveglia could be converted into a military outpost. The Canosia War with Genoa was taking place, and Poveglia provided Venice leverage to control the lagoon. However, after the war, Poveglia would be left abandoned for 200 years until 1576. Another wave of the bubonic plague would hit Venice, and Poveglia and other small islands became a quarantine colony. That brings us to now. Those who were sick would be sent to those islands, Poveglia included, where terrible things happened to the sick. At first, many of the deceased plague victims were kept in large burial pits outside of the city, but it would fill up quickly. Fearing that this would spread the disease further, symptomatic people were exiled to quarantine colonies like Poveglia, oftentimes along with corpses. They were not sent there in hopes that they could help them. They were sent there to die away from the healthy population. It was rare for anyone sent there to recover. People thought it wasn't enough to just send them there. They had to burn the bodies. Thousands of bodies were burned in an attempt to stop the pandemic, and sometimes they would burn infected victims while they were alive if they were too sick and had very low chances of recovery. This will all continue once again when the third wave of the plague would sweep the area again in the 1630s. In 1777, Poveglia would be used as a way to intercept those traveling to Venice. It would serve as a checkpoint to expect these visitors, and if they showed any signs of illness, they'd stay there. In the 1800s, an asylum would open up there in which mentally ill people would be exiled there. Back then, there was such a low standard for who could be considered mentally ill. Mentally ill patients would get experimented on in very cruel ways and treated poorly. Families and friends on the outside would abandon them because of the heavy stigma against mentally ill people at the time. With that being said, it's easy to imagine those considered to be mentally ill by the standards of the time and sent to Poveglia would get a similar treatment. The rumor about a doctor experimenting on the patients there with no anesthesia or sanitation could have been inspired by the real events that took place there. I just find the doctor throwing himself off from the asylum's bell tower because he went mad himself a bit too creepypasta for my liking. We don't even have a name for the guy, so I'm taking that part with a grain of salt, but the cruel treatment of mentally ill patients is true, and most likely that took place on an island with such a dark history already. Today, Poveglia is abandoned and locals and tourists are prohibited from visiting the island. I found this information a bit creepypasta as well. It's been said that more than 50% of the island's soil is composed of human remains due to the amount of people who died there over hundreds of years. When the bodies were burned, the human ashes were left there to free roam the island, and the seasonally grown grapes on the island were fertilized by human remains. Yeah, that sounds very creepypasta. It was a very terrible time to be in. It really shows how fear of the unknown can cause people to do scary things. It makes you wonder how you would handle a situation like this without the conveniences of modern technology and medicine. Probably not too different, right? Anyways, I gotta go. Be nice to one another and take care of yourselves. Ouch, that would have been a bad fall. Okay, that's weird.